This is Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, broadcasting live from the Fixing America Command Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, here is your host, Steve Laffey.
Hey, good afternoon again. It's a beautiful day. Steve Laffey out here. We're Steve Laffey's Fixing America. It's 3 o'clock Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. LaffeyRadio.com, brand new network we set up. Working hard at it. It's been wonderful to start to do this, to get at some of these real big problems that you don't hear on the news every day. We're thrilled that people are starting to follow us on Facebook. That's been growing, but you can do that too. Go follow us and like us at Facebook. Put some comments in there. We're Laffey Radio on Facebook. We're tweeting. I guess Twitter went public today. It's some astronomical valuation that I won't be involved in, but that's another day about stocks and valuations and so forth. And I guess it could go higher. It could pull a Facebook and go lower. But we do use it. I've always, by the way, been in a habit of having just one fundamental rule, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, even getting on the internet. I buy nothing from these people. I'm a loss leader for them. I guess they put these little cookies in. I was looking at trying to get some chairs down here, a big couch so we could watch a little TV. And gosh, I wanted some place. And I think for the next 3 or 4 weeks, I just got bombarded with ads. I don't know if they know if you buy them, or it did make it more likely, wow, maybe you should take a look at those comfortable couches and chairs swing out and you can put Fritos over here, or not maybe Fritos anymore because they get those GMO corn products in them, but something natural we could put over here. And, but I haven't bought it yet. But we use Twitter. We just don't, my family, we don't ever buy anything from it. If I buy something, I go to a store and buy something. Or I go on the internet now and buy something. When I know I want something, I'll look around and buy it. But we got a great show here today. It's a very tough show. This is a story about Social Security. It's about the intergenerational transfer of wealth. It's about the young people versus the old people, and how I guess the greatest generation is taking so much from the young people in all of these transfer payments, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all the other programs we have set up for the future, that the young people don't have much of a future. That's America today. I mean, Social Security is a place that started back in 1935. And it was supposed to be a temporary situation. And it's not. It's a permanent situation. And we're going to get into how permanent it really has to be, because we've got elected officials all over this country are talking about it in the wrong way. And you've got the Democratic Party that wants to strengthen it. That's their quote. See, people in politics usually, they get told. I used to get told this. Probably get told it again one day. Use this phrase. So Democrats want to strengthen it, Social Security. They actually don't want to strengthen it at all. They're just going to let it go broke and hope they're not in office. They don't understand time value of money. They don't understand things like present value. Maybe they don't. I don't know. I don't know if they understand it or not, because they certainly don't talk about it like they understand it. Or they just to strengthen it, they just want to raise taxes on everybody. That's it. Just raise taxes on everybody all the time and hope it all turns out okay. The Republicans, they want to save it, but they don't really want to save it. They just want to tell you that they want to save it. And some of them have some plans that don't make any sense at all. So let's take a look back at Social Security and look at where we are with Social Security. Today, there's about 62 million people getting Social Security checks. Of that, 41 million are 65 and older. That's the most recent statistics out of the Social Security office. That's an awful lot of people. I mean, we're talking about a program that affects, I think the payouts last year of Social Security in a $16 trillion economy were like $1.3 trillion. So it's like 8% of the payouts coming out. It's like 8% of the gross domestic product if you just kind of take a ratio analysis. So it's giant. I mean, it's a giant amount of money. And from the very beginning, Social Security has always been what you call a pay-as-you-go program. And what do we mean by pay-as-you-go? We mean that money just goes in, doesn't go into any lockbox, doesn't get invested, and it just simply goes out. Pay-as-you-go. It's a terrible way to do any kind of pension fund. It's the way, by the way, back in 2002, I was getting ready to run for mayor of Cranston. And at a very small scale, the 9-0 Democratic City Council, the Democratic mayor, They were so behind the eight ball. Cranston, Rhode Island was about to go bankrupt. It really couldn't because the state wouldn't let it, but it was going to default on its debt. They knew it. I knew it. I was about to run for mayor. And they decided to take all the money out of the city pension plan. There was $18 million left and $250 million of liabilities. They decided to go with the pay-as-you-go system. The reason I bring this up, and by the way, we stopped that. I took office. It was $9 million left halfway through the year. I left office 4 years later. There was $50 million in the pension fund. And I know that's relatively small numbers when you're talking about Social Security or a state pension fund. But you're sitting with listening to or watching maybe outside Nebraska, maybe the only guy you can talk to actually funded properly a pension fund, a state or local or that's trillions of dollars behind the eight ball in state and local pensions. Social Security is totally bankrupted by looking at it the way you should look at it, and we'll get into that. So I stopped the pay-as-you-go system, put the money back in, and properly invested it. And lo and behold, I left office. There was $50 million in the pension plan. I think today, of course, since the next mayors didn't want to do that, they want to just play the game of musical chairs. There's $40-some-odd million going down in the city pension plan where I used to be the mayor. But that's true everywhere. It's true in Detroit. It's true everywhere. So the pay-as-you-go system is inherently a bad system and should be scrapped because it depends on so much on data that will come out in the future that we don't know. Take a look at, for example, Social Security. Just speed forward to 1983. Social Security was sort of broke. And so Alan Greenspan had a commission, I guess it was called the Greenspan Commission, and they decided that they would fix it. But they didn't fix it at all. In fact, I think the following year in 84, they were running a deficit. So no one's really fixed Social Security. And the demographic changes that have happened in Social Security are well, in 1950, I guess a married couple would have about 3.7 kids. So that was the baby boom. Now we've got a situation where it's about 1.9, I guess, or just about 2. Let's say replacement rate. You need a little bit higher than 2 to be the replacement rate because, unfortunately, some people die along the way, and less so than a long time ago. So we have a situation now where there are far fewer kids, younger people, than there are older people. So that baby boom generation is getting older. They're probably 53, 54, 55 now. And they're just a little bit older than me. I guess I don't qualify to be a baby boomer. And they are taking more money out of the system as they live longer than anybody can possibly put in. That's the situation. That's where we are today. Since I was a kid, we've been talking about Social Security, mostly since 83. And in the 90s, we didn't talk about it that much. We're talking about it now a lot more because now it's in 2033, given today's numbers, which will probably get worse. But given today's numbers, the situation will be they'll just wake up in 2033 and your choice will be to cut Social Security benefit checks by 20-some-odd% that day. But we are totally out of whack in how we fund it. So then you have to look at a couple of things. What's a Democratic plan? We'll go through Democrat-Republican plans. We'll talk about other alternatives. But what would be a Democratic plan to fix Social Security? Well, let's go to clip 2, Charlie Rangel. I don't mean to pick on Mr. Rangel, but it's not because Mr. Rangel, the guy's been around for 50 years. We talked about him before on the show. It's not because, we want to pick on him. He just basically says what most Democrats say. If we could play, boss, clip 2. Thanks.
Recently, you may have heard that the Social Security system is broken and that the Medicare system is unsustainable. That's the Republican way of saying that they want to privatize Social Security and allow people to invest in the stock market, and that return would be theirs. Well, that's one heck of a gamble. You don't have to gamble with Social Security. Since the beginning of Social Security, they've never missed a payment, not for disability, not for survivors, and certainly not for retirement. Now, is it true that we're going to have to make legislative changes? You bet your life. Do we have another plan? Yes, we do. And that plan is that we have to make changes, but we have until 2035. What does that mean?
I'm sorry. He's saying 2035. You might mean 2033. His plan, and basically the Democratic plan, is that we've got until 2030. We've got 20 years. 2035, 2033. We've got 20 years. We don't have to do anything about it. And basically, it's the old thing that it's never missed a payment. By the way, take a look at, if you have any Puerto Rico CDs, they've never missed a payment either. They will. Detroit never missed a payment. Then they did. So the thought process that there's never missed a payment, well, of course, it's not going to miss a payment. Not now, but the older generation, and I believe it's different than what you read in the press. I'm not talking about Charlie Rangel, who's one of the older generation. But the older generation cares deeply about their children. They want them to have a better life. But all the press has never really explained to them. Most people, and I gave a speech to a Republican GOP group about 3 months ago, and it was about, I guess, 80 people in the room. It was a breakfast room. It was down in Arapahoe County, Colorado, and I was going to talk about something totally different. And these people were arguing over Social Security. These were all Republicans, by the way. And it was an older crowd. And one guy just was saying, we paid into it, we're entitled to it, blah, 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 blah. And I ended up giving this speech, which goes through some of these solutions. But I ended up ripping these people about what are you talking about? You're living longer than anybody ever thought. You're taking more money out than anybody ever thought. Because of the fact that if a husband and wife, if one dies, the other one gets the most of the payment or half the payment. It goes on forever, far more than when people put in. People are getting far more out of it. And they can't do it at the expense of the younger generation who really why do we think younger people aren't getting married in droves? A lot of them don't see a future. Whether it's the taxes they can't pay into, they just don't see a future. They feel like they're the ones getting screwed, and they don't really know how to react to it. And we've got to get out to, this show's going to get out to some of these younger people and explain to them this intergenerational transfer is putting the younger generation for the first time maybe in American history at a point where they won't have a better life. So there's a Democratic plan. And the Democratic plan gets repeated. You can go to the Democratic websites, which I do. Now here's one right here. Democrat.org. Issues. Here's their issue. In 1935, Democrats, Roosevelt created Social Security. Blah, blah, blah. Protect, and they want to their idea is not just strengthen, they want to protect Social Security. Okay, for recent years, Democrats have beaten back Republican plans to privatize Social Security, plans that would have exposed the retirement funds of millions of American seniors to great risk on the eve of financial crisis. And by the way, it goes on. I mean, it goes on. That's a Democratic, actually, website. Here's Democratic Senator Brown, Sherrod Brown. His only plan is to raise taxes. He's endorsing Tom Harkin's bill. This is literally 2 days ago. This is just now. This is November 5th, 2013. Tom Harkin's bill to expand Social Security benefits. He wants to boost benefits for beneficiaries by $70 a month. He wants the older people to get more money. That's what he wants to do. Here, by the way, when you ask anybody in a poll what they want, none of the older Americans. This is just another poll that just came out from the Associated Press. Also done in conjunction with the Public Affairs Research Council here. 62% of respondents don't want anything that could result in smaller annual raises. That means a chained CPI. It's a sacred cow, says Margie Nugent, a 55-year-old farmer. At the same number, 58 oppose gradually raising the age of retirement. Only 29% support it. So when you ask the older people, who all vote, or more vote, they don't want any of these changes, except sometimes they approve of raising the cap. By the way, Social Security cap is about $113,000 of income. Employees pay 6.2%. Employers pay about 6.2%. And the situation simply can't be that we just let it go on up to all forms of income. We did that with Medicare at 1%. But for all the employers and employees to pay up to the limit would actually really hurt our economy. No doubt about it. It would really hurt our economy. We've got to find a different way. Then you ask yourself, here's some more Democratic views, by the way. I mean, it just goes on. I guess I could go on all day about the Democratic views. Here's one that says it's not going broke at all. You know, this is Mark Jackson Easley. Another GOP talking point dies as report reveals that Social Security is not going broke. Takes the same Congressman Rangley argument. Things can go on for 20 years, it says. And after that, there's enough in reserve to pay 3/4 of future benefits. So that's the plan for the Democratic side, the progressive side. was going to cut payments by 25% 20 years from now. Ludicrous. Not a plan. This is not how you take care of your children. This is not what you would do in your household. Then you have to say, okay, so what do the Republicans want to do? I go back, first of all, to George Bush. It is true. Back to George Bush, 2005. I was asked outside of a bakery in Providence by the press about George Bush's idea to privatize Social Security. And I said, it sounds like a lousy idea. And they were shocked. Because I'm the conservative guy, I suppose, running for the United States Senate or getting ready to run for the U.S. Senate. And I said, it's just not funding it. And I also said, you're not going to be able to let it be like a 401k plan. You're not going to let it people don't treat the 401k plans, and we'll get into that, the other source of retirement. People don't treat it in a way that they should. When we allow them to borrow and move money out of it and so forth, and move it from fund to fund, we can't have that program. But my understanding of the program back then was George Bush wasn't trying to fund it. I said, let him fund it first, find a way to fund it, and then we'll talk. But until we start to fund it, we're not fixing it. And so we got Republicans right now who have their thoughts on how to fix Social Security. In fact, let's play one. Let's play Marco Rubio. And this isn't like 4 years ago. Not that he's been around too long. This is last week. This is November of 2013. Listen to Marco Rubio's thought process on how the Republican Party should fix Social Security. Go ahead, boss.
I do think that the retirement age issue is going to have to be confronted at some point as part of a measure to reform Social Security. The other is giving people the option of taking some of their Social Security money, at least a portion thereof, and investing it in an alternative to the Social Security system itself.
Right, but if you've had people that have, just made terrible mistakes and lost everything in their 401k, wouldn't they do the same thing?
Potentially, but it's their money.
See, that's not the answer, Senator Rubio. The answer doesn't end with that's their money. Listen, if the thought process is we're going back to 1870 and we're all just going back to 1870, okay, just let us all know at once. We're all going back to 1870. There is no Medicare, no Medicaid, no Social Security. I got a six-pack, a holster on each side, and I'm going down a Colorado street looking for a bar. That ain't going to happen. So to talk about that, by the way, that statement right there, it's their money, is a loser to start with. Because what will undoubtedly happen, if you privatize Social Security and just say it's all your money, but you got to put it in, but you can take it out whenever you want. We're going to go into the 401k program. And that's been a disaster, by the way. I mean, I benefited from it greatly, and I'll talk to you about it. But the Republican plan to simply say it's their money and we're going to privatize it, it's a terrible, terrible idea. It won't fly for election. It won't ever happen. And so we've got to find another way to fix Social Security. We can't just and by the way, I imagine, I'm not trying to make fun of Senator Rubio, but all the big Wall Street money would love to see this stuff get privatized because they're going to come in and tell you about, and don't get me, this is what I did for a living, don't get me started about all the plans that people have and the high net worth advisors and the churning of accounts and the stuff that goes on all the time to this very day with people who are unsophisticated. Like I'm unsophisticated in fixing a car, but there's millions of people unsophisticated in money, and they get taken by swindlers, and you don't ever read about it. They're still active out there. There's brokers. We can never allow people's retirement because one of the reasons we can't, it's a selfish reason, that if indeed we privatize Social Security, everybody had their own accounts and they were like 401k plans and they're putting them in, and then 10% just blew up their accounts. Well, we're simply not going to have people walking down the street, living on the streets at 75 years old. We're just not going to allow it. And so we've got to have a different plan. We're going to come back and talk about that. It's Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're talking Social Security. We're going to come up with some massive solutions. We got a $23 trillion problem we've got to solve in the next 40 minutes. And we'll be back to talk about that. But follow us on Facebook. Like us on Facebook. That's very important. Put some messages up there as we grow because we start talking about them on the show. Anyway, we're going to take a little break and we'll be right back. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Thanks.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages. Laffey owns guns, lots of them. But what will taking them away from him accomplish? What will banning the ones he already has do to reduce gun violence in America? Tune in to Steve Laffey's Fixing America this Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time as he dives into one of the country's biggest hot buttons. The facts surrounding gun violence may actually surprise you, but Laffey's solutions going forward should not. Only on Steve Laffey's Fixing America.
It's 6:42 p.m. Time for Steve Plotto and his son Dylan to do the dishes. They talk about everything from the yuckiness of girls to the awesomeness of his soccer team. Sometimes they don't talk at all. Then, hey! The dreaded splash fight. It's Dad o'clock, and it's the best time of the day. Because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
The call to serve. It has no sound, yet I have heard it in the whispered retelling of honorable sacrifices made by those who have served before me. The call to serve has no form, yet I have clearly seen it in the eyes of men and women infinitely more courageous and more driven than most. The call to serve has no weight, yet I have held it in my hands. I will commit to carry it close to my heart until my country is safe and the anguish of those less fortunate has been soothed. The call to serve is at once invisible and always present. And for those who choose to answer the call, for their country, for their fellow man, for themselves, it is the most powerful force on earth. America's Navy, a global force for good.
I'm in almost every school bus and classroom. I go to school with your children. We say the Pledge of Allegiance together. You see me around the neighborhood and you tell me that I'm a pretty good kid. Well, I'm one out of every 5 children in America, and I'm struggling with hunger. This problem is closer than you think. My teacher tells me we can grow up to be whatever we want. I want to grow up to be someone who doesn't go to bed hungry. There's enough food in this country to feed everybody. Please visit feedingamerica.org today and find your local food bank for ways to help. Every dollar you donate helps provide 8 meals for kids like me, quietly struggling with hunger. Together, we are Feeding America, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Well, I finally did it. I opened a 401k.
What? Why? Just wait for the inheritance. We've definitely got a rich uncle somewhere. We're one call away from the winner's circle at the Derby, dinners with multiple forks, a vacation home in the country, using summer as a verb.
You don't actually think that, do you?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs, the Rhode Island Society of CPAs, and the Ad Council.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
Young people have come to wonder what would be their lot when they came to old age. The man with a job has wondered how long the job would last. This Social Security measure gives at least some protection to 50 million of our citizens who will reap direct benefits through unemployment compensation, through old age pensions, and through increased services for the protection of children and the prevention of ill health.
And that's Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 1935. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Here we're talking about Social Security, and that's the time it was introduced. It's hard to imagine that time today in America. Although I guess if we've lived through the 2008 period where I guess if we didn't have some kind of transfer payments, we would have seen the same kind of thing in many places with so many people who lost their homes, who would have lost their homes. 1935, my father grew up in a very poor family, and he lived through that. As a young man, young boy, 12 years old, about 1935, and couldn't buy shoes. Had a quadruple E size foot, the widest foot in Rhode Island. And I always think about this story. He told me that his feet always hurt. Never had anything but a cold water flat to live in. In fact, when I was older, I used to say to my dad, where'd you grow up? No one could show me the house because it's like 15, 16 houses in Providence. His father, my grandfather, didn't pay the bill. And by the grace of God and the nice priests over at LaSalle and St. Patrick's Academy got him at least through high school. But that's FDR. Bringing us back to another time where, the payments in Social Security were so small, it added so little, and today it's become a mainstay of retirement. It really is the retirement plan. It brings about 20% of the people, I guess, in America out of poverty, just Social Security checks. So it's Steve Laffey, Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're at LaffeyRadio.com. Remember, you could tell your friend, hey, you listen to the show. We're going to put this thing up on demand forever. Very transparent. You won't find a show like this anywhere in the country where people actually take on something like this. People today are talking about the election and attacking, what happened in the Virginia elections and the New Jersey elections and the fact that a website doesn't work and so forth. And all that stuff can be very important. But in order to fix America, we're going to have to get at these very important problems, and there's people trying to do so. We were talking in the last segment about the Republican Party, and their viewpoint. The Democrats don't want to do anything. The Republican Party, we heard Marco Rubio basically telling people to fend for themselves. It's not the right message. It won't work, and we're not going back to 1870. But what does Paul Ryan think? Let's listen to Paul Ryan and clip. I think it's clip 4, boss. If you play clip 4, Paul Ryan on Social Security last week.
Social Security right now is a collectivist system. It's a welfare transfer system. It's a system where, and I always tell my constituents, and none of them usually believe me, you don't have an account with your name on it in the federal government. There isn't a box with your cash in it that's going to come to you when you retire. A lot of people think that. And what's important is if we actually accomplish this goal of personalizing Social Security, personalizing Social Security, think of what we will accomplish.
By the way, they're all laughing there in that clip because instead of saying privatize, he's saying personalize. That's his, and they all know that he can't say the word privatize, although I guess Marco Rubio says it, but he says personalize. Nothing will make people angrier who are in their 50s, who have been working their whole lives and paying that Social Security tax than to say that they're on welfare when they get a check. Nothing will make people angrier in Steeltown, USA. Ryan's from Wisconsin. I don't know why listen, it's set up wrong. It's massively underfunded. And anybody who tries to say anything about it gets pillared, gets struck. Anybody who comes up with any idea about it, the press just goes after them. You don't like older people. And all these people who are talking about it, they have parents. Of course they do. But we gotta find a real solution. And by the way, let's talk before we move to that. Let's talk about the other program that we actually have. It's called the 401k IRA, Individual Retirement Account Plan, set up decades ago. And how has it worked? Well, and one way it's worked greatly. There's trillions of dollars. It must be, I'm guessing, $9 trillion of money, of individuals in America in 401k plans. Great. But how has it really worked as a retirement plan? It's $140 billion a year of tax breaks. Okay, so if we did away with it, people would find a way around it, but there'd be $140 billion more paid into the system, it looks like, in next year's taxes. Okay, one way to solve a part of the problem. But 80% of those tax breaks go to the top 20% of earners. So listen, for me, it's been unbelievable. And that's why I never understood Romney about his taxes. I never understood in the campaign for the presidency that he didn't release them or at least 2 years of them, pay a little bit of more. he had all capital gains. So at the time he was paying 15, 16%. Instead of just explain to people, I pay the lowest amount I can possibly pay for my family, and the fact that I'd rather not send it in for all the wasteful government spending. And nobody does, by the way. Everybody understands that. It doesn't matter if you're making 10 grand, 100 grand, or 10 million. You send in the low, you get a good accountant if you can. And of course, poor people get screwed on that because they don't. And you send in as little as legally possible. Fine, I do it. But, I look at putting my money into a 401k plan back at Morgan Keegan, and I guess Payne Weber, but especially at Morgan Keegan, doing well with it, switching it to an IRA. And then in years where I've been just working for myself, where it was possible to move money at a very low tax rate into a Roth plan, because there are also things called Roth plans, and they're post-tax plans. So I put some money in there in a couple of years. I actually wasn't actively trying to make any money. Great. And then when I take it out at 59, I'll never pay taxes on it. So within the 401k, IRA, Roth, it's fun. It's tax break stuff, but that the people use privately. I mean, you've got a lot of problems. The biggest problem I ever saw, and this goes back to my days at Morgan Keegan, especially when I was in management, and we had a great matching program for people. And I would tell them, just match. And people wouldn't even match. A Morgan Keegan's going to match the first $1,000. Some secretary. I'd go up to him and say, listen, I know you're making 40 grand. Put 1,000 in, you're going to make 2. Even if you took $1,000 at the end of the year, you'd still have more money. So they would do it. But I often found many of my friends, especially the younger ones, who leave jobs. They're 30, they're 35. They've got 20 grand saved up. They move, they take the money out, pay the penalty, and the power of compounding goes away. So effectively, 401ks, IRAs, they've worked for people like me. They haven't worked for many, many people because of the ability to borrow against them and then lose money borrowing, the ability to take the money out and pay the penalty. So it's not it's just another system. Has it been okay? I guess so, but it's not the panacea. And then look what happens when you leave it up to Wall Street. There's been a lot of losses of people's 401k plans as the stock market went down. And when do people get out? They get at the bottom. They get in at the top. People are getting in now. It's a whole other show about, forcing people into this wealth effect, into the stock market, which is only about 50% of the Americans. So that hasn't worked. And then what happens when people step out and say, I'm going to help? What happens to them? There's a great example recently. There's a man named Stanley Druckenmiller, who by happenstance is a Bowdoin College graduate like myself. He went eventually to work for George Soros. He made an awful lot of money. He helped break the Bank of England, who were up to foolishness. He made those markets work for him and his partners. He made a lot of money. The only best compliment I ever got when I graduated from Bowdoin College was a professor I took 5 college classes with, Professor Shipman. He was older then, and he wrote my recommendation to Harvard Business School. And I got all A's in his classes, all A's in I think every economic class except for one. And I loved economics. I wanted to get my PhD in economics, what I wanted to do. And I never did. And but he said, you're the best economics major we've had since Stanley Druckenmiller. And I was like, oh, okay. I remember it. I didn't know who the guy was. He obviously was a very, very talented guy. So he, in his retirement or post running other people's money, he decides to go out around the country and get on TV and visit some colleges and say, we're broke. And actually really put it into the faces of these younger people at colleges that, hey, you got to step up like the Vietnam War and protest and tell the older people, hey, here's a statistic for you. People who are 65 years old today, this is more than Social Security, this is all the transfer payments we have planned, on average, will take out $327,000 more than they put in. Big benefit. And so they're not entitled necessarily to that, but we don't have enough younger people. But if you're 0 today, you just had a baby, little baby boy, you got to look him in the eye and say, based on these transfer payments, forget about the public debt, you're down $422,000. Older people, up $327,000. Younger people, down $420,000. So there's an intergenerational war, figuratively speaking, that's happening now. And I'm not sure either side understands it. Because I remember campaigning for mayor and the Senate. And I remember, especially these older people, if you meet with them, I remember all the time them saying, keep the school system good, Mr. Laffey, when I was running for mayor. We don't mind paying tax if it's for the school system, because I had a good education. So this thought process that older people are just selfish, is not true. There's a lack of understanding by them and a lack of understanding by especially younger people who implicitly know there's a problem, but explicitly still don't. It's so far out there for them that they're down so much money. So Druckenmiller goes out, he makes speeches, he goes around, and what happens to the poor guy? I mean, he doesn't care. He's a brave guy, goes out and does it, but here's what happens. You've got Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize winner. By the way, I was looking it up this morning. I couldn't remember why the guy won a Nobel Prize. I have no idea. I still don't after looking it up. I guess it's because he was attacking George Bush. But they say it's because he did some stuff on trade analysis and how people locate within economic activity. All right. Doesn't sound like Milton Friedman to me, but anyway, he's got a Nobel Prize. That's why there's certain things we don't pay attention to anymore. One of them is the Nobel Prizes. Right? The Nobel Peace Prize went to Obama. Looks like we've been involved in a lot of battles. And he goes after him for being a billionaire investor and talking about it's a fantasy that Druckenmiller's talk about this problem, which is primarily Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. He talks about it that it's never going to happen. In fact, I do mean fantasies, he says. Washington has spent the past 3+ years in terror of a debt crisis that is not happening and, in fact, can't happen to a country like the United States, which has its own currency and borrows in that currency. Yet the scaremongers, meaning Druckenmiller, Stanley Druckenmiller, can't bring themselves to let go. It totally, he says, as I've already suggested, there are two remarkable things about this kind of doomsaying. One is that the doomsayers haven't rethought their premises despite being wrong again and again. Mr. Krugman, people like Druckenmiller, people like Larry Kotlikov, who's a professor of economics, we're going to talk about his solution for Social Security in a couple of minutes. They're doing this because they care about their children. Just because it hasn't happened yet, that rates haven't risen, doesn't mean that it won't. What about the people who were walking around in 2004, 2005, 2006? They were wrong for years about the real estate bubble. I mean, some people like John Paulson made billions off of it, but they knew and they were worried about it and they brought it up. I had real estate brokers, one of my buddies, Jimmy, he talked about it for years. He was totally worried about it. He knew that it happened. So guys like Krugman, they never responsible when these things happen. And of course, he goes on to compare America to Japan. Don't believe me? Look at Japan, a country that, like America, has its own currency and borrows in that currency, has much higher debt relative to GDP than we do, et cetera, like they're doing just fine. They got a 30-year problem. The 80s to 2000 and something, until just recently with Abe, they had a giant problem. And of course, you get people who run magazines. Tom Friedman, I guess, wrote a couple of positive things. And then a guy named Robert Cutner goes after him. This is the co-founder of the American Prospect. But it's not just these guys. It's like there's many articles from the left that are going after people like Stanley Druckenmiller because they're trying to help fix the problem. It's unbelievable. And the problem is huge. Take a look before we go to the break. Let's play clip 1, the disability benefit problem in New Mexico, boss. Thanks.
Good evening. People with disabilities who rely on the Social Security Administration for their benefits could soon be in big trouble.
People who get disability benefits need them to survive.
About 117,000 New Mexicans with disabilities get money from the Social Security Administration.
People who are disabled and cannot work will be at risk.
Federal judges who approve those benefits say the fund is running dry.
More money is going out than is coming in.
They estimate in 2 years there won't be enough money to pay people 100% of their benefits, saying they may get around 80 cents to every dollar.
There are really two problems.
One, many people who lost their jobs are now applying for benefits when they would have and could have been working instead.
The government needs to step up, and it needs to provide jobs and income for people. People should not have to starve.
And two, judges say they need lawyers with them in the courtroom to help study cases in order to prevent paying benefits to people who don't qualify for them.
The facts will come out better. It's not the most efficient way to operate where you have one party in a courtroom represented and the other party, the government, without representation.
And those federal judges that we met here in Santa Fe while at a conference, they say that projection that the disability fund will run out in 2 years comes from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. Reporting live in Santa Fe tonight.
So there's New Mexico, and the reason I played the clip then is that we're 2 years away in New Mexico from all holy heck hitting the fan. The feds don't bring lawyers in. They've got all these people from outside the country getting disability benefits. It's massive fraud, but it's happening now. And so we've got to get ahead of the curve. And people like Stanley Druckenmiller are doing their part, and we still got to get to what would be the solution. So now you know the problem. You know how many people are trying to do something about it and what happens to them politically. And in our final segment, we're going to take a look at a 10-step program to fix Social Security once and for all in a way that both the Republicans and Democrat-leaning people can agree upon. It's Steve Laffey at LaffeyRadio.com. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We'll be right back after one more break.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. It's like tiny nails in the air poke my lungs. I start to cough. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital.
Today, 1 out of 13 children suffer from some form of asthma, accounting for nearly 1/3 of all emergency room visits.
I feel like I'm choking. It's kind of like an elephant is on my chest. A little whistle sound comes out when I breathe.
But while your child may suffer from asthma doesn't have to make your child suffer. There are simple ways you can prevent your child's next attack. To learn more, log on to www.noattacks.org or call your doctor, because even one attack is one too many.
I feel like a fish with no water.
Brought to you by the EPA, the Ad Council, and this station.
I am an American soldier. I'm a warrior and a member of a team.
I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values.
I will always place this first.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never quit.
I will never leave a fallen comrade.
I am disciplined.
I am disciplined.
Physically and mentally tough.
Trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills.
I always maintain my arms, my equipment, and myself.
I am an expert and I am a professional.
I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the
enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
There's strong, and there's Army strong. See what it takes at GoArmy.com.
Picture this, your next trip, Utah, 5 national parks. First, Zion. You're walking, the ground rises, the ground drops, the ground becomes water. Next, Bryce. You're riding a mule. You're riding a mule under giant orange strip castles. You are not dreaming. You will not forget this. On to Capitol Reef. Take the scenic route, the really scenic route. Take a path you've never taken and see the stars for the first time. Now for Canyonlands. You're riding a bike. You're riding a bike on Mars. Now you're riding the rapids. Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, Classic. Arches, 5:32 a.m. Some things are worth racing the sunrise for. The horizon lightens. You round the corner. Whoa. This is Life Elevated. The Mighty 5. 5 iconic parks, 1 epic experience. Plan your trip at visitutah.com.
Laffey owns guns, lots of them. But what will taking them away from him accomplish? What will banning the ones he already has do to reduce gun violence in America? Tune in to Steve Laffey's Fixing America this Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time as he dives into one of the country's biggest hot buttons. The facts surrounding gun violence may actually surprise you, but Laffey's solutions going forward should not. Only on Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
It is a Ponzi scheme to tell our kids that are 25 or 30 years old today, you're paying into a program that's going to be there. Anybody that's for the status quo with Social Security today is involved with a monstrous lie to our kids, and it's not right.
Our nominee has to be someone who isn't committed to abolishing Social Security, but who's committed to saving Social Security. We have always had, at the heart of our party, a recognition that we want to care for those in need, and our seniors have the need of Social Security.
You cannot keep the status quo in place and not call it anything other than a Ponzi scheme. It is. That is what it is. Americans know that, and regardless of what anyone says, oh, it's not, and that's provocative language. Maybe it's time to have some provocative language in this country.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is. There's the governor of Texas, Rick Perry, in a debate, a national debate for president of the United States of America, taking on Social Security as a Ponzi scheme. And he got pilloried for it. He got made fun of for it. And it's a monstrous lie, is what he said. And generally speaking, he was correct. It is a Ponzi scheme. And there's nothing wrong with saying it. And that's the definition of a Ponzi scheme. If you don't know what it is, go look up, I guess it was Charles Ponzi back in the early 1900s and what he did, and go just keep going on. It is a Ponzi scheme. And then you have Romney. This is one of the reasons he lost. He just took the old Republican thing, basically say nothing, have no plan for it, run commercials where you're going to balance the budget by increasing defense spending. It was ludicrous. And by the way, this is the thing that really irks me about the Republican Party plan. I've heard this so many times from Eric Cantor, from Paul Ryan. It's in Paul Ryan's plan over here, the roadmap plan. And they keep raising it, but they always say when nobody over 53 will pay for any changes in Social Security. Well, here's the whole point of this show. We all got to be in fixing America. It's the whole point of what we're doing here. We've all got to be involved. Everybody's got to be involved in some way, shape, or form. Older people, younger people, rich people, poor people, whatever, white people, black people. Everybody's going to be involved, or we won't fix it. And so when you have a plan, the Republican plan, that basically says if you're a baby boomer, you vote a lot. The young guys don't. The young ladies don't. You won't pay for any of it. Wink, wink. You're not going to fix it. And so we've got to get to let me tell you about Larry Kotlikoff. And, listen, I've never had too many original ideas. I steal them from everybody. So I try to make sure I give acknowledgement when it's due. But when I was getting ready to make the movie Fixing America, fixingamericamovie.com. And right now we're Steve Laffey's Fixing America at LaffeyRadio.com. That's where you need to go. And check out, by the way, the Laffey Minute today. The new one every day during the week. And we got a new Fixing America Presents up. You'll like it. It's been done wonderfully well. Thanks, guys, for putting that up there. And we got the Laffey Buzz, was a new blog that we started. But when I was getting ready to make the movie, I needed someone who understood the fair tax, who'd done the original research on the fair tax. And I looked up from this guy, Larry Kotlikoff. And so we called him about that. And, of course, it's not what's in the movie. He's the one who really started getting me thinking about the $200+ trillion, the unfunded balances that we have that's on our children's head. And that's what he's in the movie about, Larry Kotlikoff. Great guy, by the way. He's up at Boston University, and he's in the paper all the time, and good friend. And what I got out of him at that day, too, was how much he really cared for his kids, how mad he was about what was going to happen to his kids. And that's the message we've got to take to America. The people who have children, if you don't have children, you have nieces, you have nephews, people concerned about the younger generation. We've got to turn it to that and get them concerned. And when it comes to Social Security, he ended up putting this in a book, but he and I talked about it a lot. But his plan, he calls them the purple plans for personal security. But the number one thing, let me just go through it with you. And I think it's a great plan. I think it's one. By the way, Larry worked for the Social Security Administration. He knows more about Social Security. He has a website. I can't remember the name of it. But it's so complicated. It's like 2,300 rules in Social Security. No one can figure out when to take it. He can't. He's the only guy who does know, I think. But he can figure it out. But when it comes to fixing Social Security, when we say fix, we want the assets to match liabilities, the revenue to match the cost. That's fixing. And so how do we do it? Well, one, we just stop everybody where they are. You know that letter you've gotten from the Social Security Administration? Maybe they don't send it out anymore because they're broke, but It's on the internet, I guess, now. So it tells you what you're going to get if you stopped right now. You have 50, I get one. I'm going to get X, Y, Z when I'm 62 or 65, or I guess 67, and so forth. And I don't mind that, by the way. I'm one of those guys that get pushed into 67, just the way it went. So you stop it. You stop the system so nobody's disadvantaged in some respects. Older people are getting what they're supposed to get. Younger people are getting, but they're more disadvantaged, so we got to give them something better. So what do we do then? We start contributing money, almost like a 401k, but it's your own account. This is what's missing from it's your own account, but it's not one you can borrow from. It's not one you can take money out of. Say it's 8%. You're working. You put 8% in for your retirement. And that's it. You're going to keep putting it in, but it's yours. Keel over at 45, you get it, or your heirs get it. But you get to be a certain age, and it's basically a very good way of looking at what you should be doing with your own accounts. You get to be a certain age. Let's say it's 61. Could be 62. Then what do? Every year for the next 10 years or so, you just stop buying annuities with it. Not you, by the way, the government. We're not going to go back to letting people manage their own Social Security accounts like Marco Rubio wants. We're not, because we're going to let up with people on the street. And we're not going to accept that in America today. So let's just put that off to the side. So what we are going to do is have an account with your name on it, and what's it going to be invested in? Well, I did a paper on this I'm not Larry Kotlikoff on Social Security, but 1983 or 84 with Professor Shipman, I did a study on how much money you lost in Social Security versus investing it privately or yourself if you kept it all in. And it was a lot of money. And I probably did it wrong. I mean, I was junior, senior in college. But I did a whole study on this thing, a long way of looking at it. And but what if the U.S. government invested that, not with Wall Street brokers? They're out. They're not in this one. But in a world basket of whatever the world represents. 2/3 of it is probably bonds, right? So it's a world basket. And what if the government just said one thing to the people who put their money in? You're going to get, and I don't want to confuse people, you're going to get a zero economic return. I mean, adjusted for inflation, that's the minimum you're going to get. You probably do better. In fact, you would do better. We do know that investing over a long period of time, people do better. But the government guarantees that. And so you're going to get a better return. And you're not going to deal with Wall Street brokers. And it's going to be with the government. It's not going to be privatized. It's with the federal government. You get one giant computer, right? Your name's on it. Your money goes in. And we get to be 61. We stop buying annuities for you. The federal government starts buying annuities. And you kind of get into it. So you get to be 71, let's say. 100% you're clipping coupons. It's all an annuity. And I guess there's a risk that everybody your age is a lot more people than you think, but all the 61-year-olds are sort of in the same program. It's all over the country, all different jobs. And so that's the program. We can get to, we could do things where if you're married, you put half the money in your wife's account. She puts half in your account, right? Partners or whatever. You can. So if people get divorced or split up, you don't have these arguments, you know? It's just, you get half of it. You got your half, the other person got the other half. That's a plan. And you buy these tips with it, Treasury adjusted inflation certificates, whatever they call them. That's what you're buying with your annuities. So you're protected against inflation. And so that's a great program. What have we done? Well, let's take a look back at it. One, all the people in the program, whatever, you're 55 today and the check says you're going to get $3,000 a month when you turn 67, you're still going to get that. You got 5 years to invest 8% of what you make into the stock market, a world stock market basket. If you keel over at 57, 58, you made, I don't know, whatever it is, made $100,000, let's say, you got $8,000 in the account, it multiplied and so forth. You get that money. Once you start putting this money into annuities in your 60s, and we can adjust that year, maybe it's 62, maybe it's 63. Whenever you get into it, we start buying for you annuities. Put the annuities in inflation-adjusted certificates, and when you get to be a certain age, say after 10 years, you're totally vested. Now you're totally in. If you keel over the next day after that, then you're out. But everybody's into this pool where they bought annuities, and we know what the pool is. It's a large amount of people. That's an effective program. It takes the right-wing thing. How does the left wing attack that? We're not talking about privatizing the accounts. We're talking about a giant ETF, not to confuse people. But we're talking about a very low-cost way of investing, almost minuscule. We're going to be buying some bonds from around the country. We're going to be buying stocks in America. But 2/3 of it's going to probably be in bonds. Maybe not 2/3. Maybe 60% will be in bonds. So be very safe. And if you're starting at 20, you've got a lot of time to pick up the pace. All right, so here's the big question. And this is what we get down to at the end of all that program. Sort of a 10-step program. What do we do about the people who don't make enough money? They never make enough money to have a half-decent retirement. Well, we fund that. Now we're down to one question. That's the question in America we want to get at. What do we do about the people who can't take care of themselves, been stuck in low-end jobs for 40 years? Well, we'll fund some of that. We'll find a way to fund it. We fund a lot of things for people. But that's the most efficient way, I think, as I sit here today, to fund, to fix. Right now, for example, it's $23 trillion in the hole. This plan, call it the purple plan because red and blue and so forth, I just call it a common sense plan, is to stop where we are, say this thing hasn't been working. We've got $23 trillion in debt on our children's head over this program. Everybody keep what you have. So if you're 23 and you haven't had enough, you really have nothing. Okay. And now you're going to be the bigger beneficiary of the long-term 40-year investment plan for you. And now you know it's there. And if you marry someone and you keel over at 50, she's going to get the money. Or he's going to get the money, whatever it is. And then we get down to what we should get down to in America. What do we do about the working class poor? What we should be doing in Social Security benefits, disability benefits. What do we do with the people who are totally disabled? They got in a car wreck, quadriplegic, they cannot work. I'm taking an extreme example. But we have massive fraud in Social Security today. In fact, I just saw it on the TV the other day, paying out benefits to people who were dead for years and years. I mean, it's billions of dollars. So that's a real plan. Can we get to it? I think so, yes. I hate to think that we only get to some kind of solutions when there's a giant crisis. I mean, I've lived that. I've lived that being the mayor of Cranston. We only got to solutions in Cranston because the crisis had come. And people knew it. And they had their blinders on. In the tough medicine, I took giant amount of cod liver oil when I was the mayor of Cranston in a bankrupt city with the lowest bond rating and shoved it down everybody's throat. And I marched around and made people do it. And I changed the votes. It took an awful lot of energy. I'd like to not see that happen in America. And that's going to happen in America because we played the clips of Charlie Rango and Marco Rubio. One saying do nothing, the other would say let the people manage it themselves and we won't worry about it. We can't do that with Social Security. We just can't. When I was in Rhode Island, I had a plan for the people's pension plan because they wouldn't manage it, just to give them what was left and put it in 401k plans. And for them, that was because these people would totally mismanage it. And they have been totally mismanaged for years and years and years. But when it comes to Social Security, as a nationwide program that our parents are in, we've got to find another solution. The solution has to make assets match liabilities. This is the only thing I've read that and I thank Larry Kotlikov for really coming up with it, that makes sense that I think that people could buy into. I mean, someone 66 says, well, it really doesn't affect me very much. I'm already 66. Yeah, okay. We could do something with the chained CPI and have lower rates of inflation, that the true rate of inflation rather than they've been putting in there. We can do that. We can do a lot of things in a lot of these programs. But today, if we went to that program, we just saved, $23 trillion over the years to come. And people will have a far better return, especially the younger people who've got to rise up. Anyway, it's Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We've solved a big problem today. We're going to solve some more tomorrow. LaffeyRadio.com. If you've heard this broadcast, tell your friends. Send a clip to them. Send one of the Laffey Minutes to them. And we're going to come back tomorrow with another show and fix another problem. And this is what we want to do. We want to get you information so that you can be out there talking to people. Hey, that's a good idea. Anyway, thanks for listening in. Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Catch us tomorrow with another show where we try to solve the gun problem in America. God bless. Talk to you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Steve Laffey's Fixing America radio program on the Laffey Radio Network. Fixing America is broadcast Monday through Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. right here at www.laffeyradio.com. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this broadcast without the express written consent of Laffey Network, LLC is prohibited.